Good morning, and welcome to the Chiefs briefing for the September 9th, 2025 special election. Thank you for joining this morning as we're going to go over a number of legal and procedural updates for this election. First off, as always, I want to remind you of the key members of our office. We have our electoral board. The Honorable Chairman is the Honorable Catherine Hanley. The Vice Chairman is Kevin Pinkney, and the Secretary of the Electoral Board is Jeffrey Shapiro. Our General Registrar and Director of Elections is Eric Spicer. Our Deputy General Registrar and Deputy Director of Elections is Cheryl Jones. And I also now serve as our second Deputy General Registrar and Deputy Director of Elections. I'm happy to be joined by a number of staff here today, including our Training and Operations Manager, Sean Rogers, Training and Operations Specialist, Jean Tenson, and two members of our Training and Operations staff, Steve Wake and Arash Sediyashi. We have a number of topics that we're going to go through with you here today, including an overview of the election, what's new, things to remind you about before Election Day, opening the polls during the day, some reminders about non-routine and provisional voters, using the voter referral worksheet, closing the polls, and then we'll open it up to you for your questions, and our staff will be happy to answer them. All right, let's go into a little bit about this election. So as a reminder, as always, whether if you're a new chief or assistant chief, or if you're someone who's done this a few times before or many times before, all the information you need to know is contained in the chief's notebook. Make sure to review the table of contents and to familiarize yourself with the contents before Election Day. So that way you know where to look if you need to find something on Election Day. And as always, we have checklists for every procedure. You can see by all these screenshots here, all these thumbnails of the different checklists. There's a checklist for everything, including, you can see in the middle there, a chief's checklist for opening, for closing, for other procedures throughout the notebook. So not only do you have a guide that you can hand to each officer for things during opening or closing, the ones with the green headers or the red headers, the purples are the ones for before Election Day, the yellow are for during the day, but then you have guides for yourself as well to guide you through all the key checklist items you need to know and do as a chief or assistant chief. This is a special election, of course, by the date of the election, and there's only one contest on the ballot. That's for the 11th Congressional District with two candidates, and that's to fill the seat of the late Jerry Connolly. And just as a reminder, this is the same in a primary election, and it's the same in special elections, that if a voter is going to be 18 years old by the date of the November general election, then they are eligible to vote in this election. So you may have some 17-year-old voters. As long as they're on the poll book, you can check them in normally. Now, we have some updates that may be familiar to those of you who served in the June primary election, but we know many of you did not serve in that election. And all of you serving as a chief in this election did not serve as a chief in the June election. So we want to provide a refresher and reminder on some of the things that were new in that election. So as we go through this chief's briefing today, you'll notice slides like this, excuse me, may be new to those of you who have not yet served this year. So first off is we've updated the terminology for our voting equipment. We want to make it easier for election officers and voters to implicitly understand what it is when we refer to something. So the devices that we used to call poll pads, we're now referring to as e-poll books. Devices that are known as express votes, we're now referring to as ballot marking devices. Devices known as DS300s are now being referred to as ballot scanners. So for example, if you tell a voter after you finish marking your ballot, walk it over to the ballot scanner, they'll understand more what that means. And as we go through our briefing today, and as you'll see in the Chief's notebook, these are the terms that we use throughout. We have a number of resources that we're providing to each precinct in this election, including 3 to 5 e-poll books, 2 ballot marking devices, 2 ballot scanners, and 2 admin tablets, same as what we did in the November election. We're also issuing ballots for 40 to 60% of active registered voters. That's more ballots than we would typically issue in a special election, but we believe this is a special election that's unlike any other we've had in Fairfax County history. That's because in this election, it's a special election for a federal contest, which we haven't had in at least 25 years. And it's an election that's occurring after a presidential election, right before a competitive gubernatorial election. It's occurring after the introduction of no excuse early voting. We just want to be ready for any turnout on Election Day. So we're issuing you ballots for more than enough voters that we think you may expect. Each precinct will also have between 5 to 11 total election officers. That includes the chief, the assistant chief, 1 to 2 collector officers, a provisional specialist, and all other officers. Note that in this election, every precinct will have at least one provisional specialist, because what we think we're going to see is turnout that looks kind of similar to a November general election. And we want to make sure that you have a provisional specialist to help you with however many provisionals you may get. And of course, if you have a lot of provisional voters on election day, call us and let us know, because we do have some reserve provisional specialists that we can send your way if needed. All right, let's go into some things that are new for this election for you to be aware of. First off, there was a big question about whether or not schools would be closed on Tuesday, September 9th. I'm pleased to share that all FCPS facilities and schools are closed on the day of the election. And we would extend our thanks to the Fairfax County Electoral Board and to the Fairfax County Public Schools Superintendent and School Board for coordinating on this, because that will help ensure student safety, and make sure that we have large enough voting rooms, and that there's plenty of voter parking and access for everyone involved. So yes, schools are closed. That means you should be able to use your standard voting room. Everything should be very similar to past elections in that regard. The big change this year, of course, is that we have the introduction of new voting equipment. We have new ballot scanners and new ballot marking devices. The ballot scanners were first used in the June primary election without much issue. There were a few hiccups here and there, small things that happen whenever you're introducing new voting equipment, and we've addressed all of those issues. So for those of you who have not yet used the new ballot scanners, we expect you'll have a very smooth experience. For the ballot marking devices, these are of course an evolution of the previous ballot marking devices that we have. They run faster, they're easier to use, and we expect that they'll be better for voters. And all of you who've come in for training recently have had an opportunity to practice on this equipment as well. So we're very excited about the use of the new voting equipment in this election. We have an update to the terminology we use to refer to this compartment on the ballot scanner. This used to be called the auxiliary compartment. We're now referring to it as the emergency compartment. As a reminder, this is the compartment you would use if the ballot scanner is not operational. And really, that's if both ballot scanners that are issued and deployed to you are not operational. Then you could open this compartment and have voters insert ballots in there until a rover can visit your precinct and help restore a ballot scanner to operational use. So it's rare that this occurs, but we just want you to be aware that that compartment still exists, and we're now calling it the emergency compartment. We introduced an overhaul to the voter referral worksheet last year, and we've made some updates this year. So no change from the June election if you served then, but we do want to alert the rest of you who did not serve in June that we updated this form, to further simplify the process for voters who simply need to do a same-day registration. So Sean is going to take you through this in more detail later, but it's a little bit simpler and easier to do so. We're also excited that earlier this year, we introduced a new tool on the admin tablets called the Precinct and Address Lookup app, or PAL. This is going to replace the My Neighborhood app for most of you. It's a specialized mapping tool that's custom built for elections, and it shows all the information you need to help process a voter who's in the wrong place or who needs to do a same-day registration. We've also introduced new provisional bags. These are now the location for where provisional ballots are stored during the day, during voting hours. For those of you who served the November election, you may recall that we used the auxiliary compartment at the time for this. This is to help us comply with all legal and procedural requirements. And this is now a secure location to place all provisional ballots during the day. And again, we'll go through this in more detail later. We have some updates to various posters. First, the posters for how to use the ballot scanner and use the ballot marking device have been updated to, of course, reflect the updated voting equipment. Earlier this year, we also introduced an update to the poster about opting out of automatic mail ballots. It's just a little bit simpler and easier to read now for voters. In this election, we've also updated the Attention All Voters poster, the one on the right there. This lists the different types of acceptable IDs for voters, and I'll go through in a little bit the reason for this. This was an update from the Virginia Department of Elections. And one thing we've done to make it easier for you is we've taken the 4 posters, one each in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean. Instead of giving you 4 different printouts, we've now put them all together onto one poster to make that simpler and easier to post. The Virginia Department of Elections also updated the prohibited area and activities poster, so you'll receive an updated version of this one in your materials, but it's very similar to the previous one. You still have two posters, one in English and Spanish, one in Vietnamese and Korean. We've made an update to the emergency envelope. So as you may recall, this is an envelope that contains materials you might need in an emergency situation, but in most cases, in most precincts, you never have to touch or open this envelope. Well, there's a couple key updates here. One, this envelope, it used to be a red envelope. It's now a large yellow envelope with a large label on it. As before, it contains materials that you only need in an emergency situation. And we're now shifting 3 items into this envelope that were packed elsewhere. Those 3 items are the backup paper poll book, the close of books report, and the final absentee list. For those of you who've been with us for a while, you may remember that these are the materials you would use if all of your e-poll books are not functional. Of course, that's a very rare situation. And so we've now shifted these items here because you generally don't need to use them unless there's a significant issue occurring. And if that were to happen, we'd help walk you through that. But just be aware, these materials are now in the updated emergency envelope. Next, we've updated the orange pouch. We used to have what we called a keys envelope, and that keys envelope contained equipment keys, a password card, and some other small items. We've now shifted those items into the orange pouch. This used to be shipped empty, and now it has those materials instead. So you have one less thing you have to worry about. There is no separate keys envelope. It's simply in the orange pouch. So that separate envelope has now been phased out, and this pouch will contain the equipment keys, password card, and the voter permit cards. And it's also the same place you've already been returning those items. Now, keep in mind that this pouch needs to be shown, the fact that it's sealed and closed needs to be shown to all election officers during opening procedures before you break the seal and open it. We've made a change to the election officer oath form. We've added a section at the bottom now that allows you to indicate if an election officer showed up late or has to leave early. And by moving this information to the election officer oath form, it allowed us to eliminate the separate compensation sheet form. So you have one fewer form there as well. So just be aware of that. No more comp sheet, and that information is now at the bottom of the election officer oath form. We've also made it a little bit easier for where you as the chief need to sign on this form. It's in the same place as all the other officers. So hopefully there's no missing signatures on this form. The Virginia Department of Elections, in concert with the Attorney General of Virginia, have informed all election officers across the state that there's an update to the list of acceptable IDs. The Department of Motor Vehicles now issues a mobile ID app, and that is now an acceptable form of ID for voting purposes. So you may have a voter who has installed the Virginia MID app on their phone and chooses to show that as their acceptable ID for voting. And that's completely fine to use for voting purposes. The one thing to be aware of as it relates to this ID is that when they open the app, it doesn't immediately open the ID. So what a voter would want to do is to tap on looking at that left screen, they would tap on the driver's license option at the bottom. That opens the screen in the middle that has a picture of the voter and a large QR code. And they would simply tap what info am I sharing at the bottom to open up the screen on the right, because that is what shows the voter's name, address, and other information. So you and the election officers would simply want to see that screen to be able to accept this ID. It's just another form of acceptable ID. We don't know how many voters will show it in this election, but we think it'll be an increasingly common form of ID in future years. And just be aware that the poll pads cannot scan the QR code that shows up there. So this is an ID that if a voter shows it to you, you would do a manual search for that voter. Let's talk about write-ins on the ballot. So as we upgraded our voting equipment this year, we were able to make an improvement to how write-ins are handled on the ballot. Now, to be clear, there's been no change in the instruction to voters. What you see here on the screen is still the same information that shows up on the ballot to instruct voters for how to vote for a write-in if they so choose to do so. As you can see there, to vote for a write-in, a voter is instructed to fill in the bubble next to the words write-in and then write the person's name for whom they'd like to vote. So there's no change in the instructions to voters. What is a little bit different now is how these ballots are handled by our ballot scanners. So the image on the top there, where a voter has filled in the bubble next to write-in and wrote the name in of Wendy write-in, that will be counted by the ballot scanner just as it always has. We've now updated the configuration of the ballot scanners thanks to some new options available to us to now also look for, even if the voter has not filled in the bubble, but they've written in a name, to now also be able to read and count that as a write-in vote as well. So again, we still would prefer that voters fill in the bubble, but even if they don't, the scanner will now be aware of that and be able to scan and count that write-in vote. Now, there's one issue we want to make sure you're aware of as it relates to this change that may lead to a few more spoiled ballots, which is sometimes, and we see this during recounts when we have to go and look at all the ballots again, that a voter may choose to fill in the bubble for a candidate who is on the ballot, and then also write in that candidate's name on one of the write-in lines. So in this case, the scanner will now see this as two votes. They'll see it as an overvote. And so the scanner will hold that ballot and ask the voter, do you want to return this ballot and vote it again? Or do you want to go ahead and cast an overvoted ballot? So we just want you to be aware that this may be a situation. A voter may come to you and say, why is the scanner not accepting my vote? And you would want to ask the voter, did you fill in a bubble and write in a name? And if so, then you would spoil the ballot and issue the voter a new ballot. Again, we don't think this is going to happen very often, but it is something that is different thanks to the improved configuration of the ballot scanners. So we want to make sure you're aware of that. The election officer evaluation form that you complete towards the end of the day is now digital. So that form is now handled on your admin tablets. So there's no paper form for that anymore. And on this form, we're now emphasizing for election day that we simply want you to let us know about officers. Oh, someone's jumping through my slides here. Let's get back to the slide that we were on. So for the election officer evaluation form, we simply want you to emphasize, we're asking for you to provide information on election day about election officers who may not be performing up to the same performance as everyone else. If there are individuals who are having issues or not able to perform all duties, those are the main officers for whom we'd like you to fill out the election officer evaluation form on election day. And that's what the digital form is geared around. If you have officers who are performing great, we still want to hear about them, but we're primarily going to capture that information through the post-election survey. That's a survey that we send to you on the morning after the election. That still is going out just like it always does, and it's still an opportunity for you to provide feedback about all officers. But the election officer evaluation form, the new digital form, is now geared towards if there are specific officers who have issues on election day. So if you don't have anyone who fits in that category, then you don't have to fill out this form on election day, and you can simply provide all your election officer feedback in the post-election survey. The Dropbox chain of custody form has seen a design update. So the previous version you can see on the left, and you can see the new version on the right. So we've simply taken the form, cleaned up the design to match our other forms, and make it a little bit easier to see where you need to fill in the number of ballot envelopes collected from the Dropbox and the different names and signatures of the collector officers. So no change in information collected, just an updated design to the form. As we did in the June election, we're now requiring the use of the SOR Helper app. If you remember, this is the app that we used in the November election that allows you to take all the information from the closing numbers worksheet, fill it in on the app on the admin tablets, and then it will generate a PDF of what your complete statement of results should look like. You don't have to worry about where the numbers go. You don't have to worry about doing all the math. It will do that for you. And then your job is simply to copy that information to your paper form, because of course we can't fill out your paper form for you. So this app is now required. And we saw that the precincts who used this in the November election and in the June election had almost no errors. Whereas the folks who chose to do it manually, there were still a number of issues that then had to be corrected. We had to call some folks in after election day for that. So please use the SOR Helper app during your closing procedures. And of course, if you experience technical issues with the app, then we understand if you're not able to use it for that reason. But otherwise, we find that this goes a long way to helping you close faster and more accurately. All right, well, that was a summation of what's new in this election. Now let's turn to some reminders for things before Election Day. As always, check regularly for emails and calls from us, including at our email address, electionofficers@fairfaxcounty.gov, and from our phone number, 703-324-4735. I hope all of you have that number saved in your phone so you know immediately if you get a call from us. As in the past year, we have a pre-election checklist for you in the election officer portal, so you can check off your key chief tasks as you have them completed and to be aware of what's left to do. So be in the lookout for that in the election officer portal. By Friday, August 29th, we are asking, so that's next Friday, we want to make sure you've contacted your polling place, you've selected your supply pickup and site setup times for the day before the election, contact the officers on your roster, and of course, have completed this briefing. All of this information will be available to you in the election officer portal at the end of this briefing. So we're going to flip that switch at the end of this briefing, and you'll have all that information for you. Our chief open house is next Tuesday, August 26th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's a great opportunity to come out, see all the different new materials and procedures, ask questions of all of our key office staff, and of course, it's a great opportunity for you to pick up your chief's notebook before Election Day. The chief open house is now a week earlier than it has been in the past. It's 2 weeks before Election Day. And so it's a great chance to pick up your notebook and have plenty of time to review it before Election Day. If you don't pick up your notebook early or attend the open house, that's okay. Your chief's notebook will be packed in the black kit that the chief picks up the day before the election. And of course, you have access to the PDF online already. Now, on Monday, September 8th, this is the day before the election, if you're the chief, your job is to go to your assigned depot at the time that you selected. You're going to pick up your black kit and your e-poll books, and then you're going to go to your polling place for your site setup. So remember, as soon as you pick up your materials, you need to go directly to your polling place for setup. And if you're at a school, we've arranged for a setup window between 3:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. So your setup must start and finish within this time window. Now be aware, schools are closed on Election Day, Tuesday, September 9th, but they are open on Monday, September 8th. And so what that means is schools and students are still in session towards the end of that day on Monday. And when we looked, most schools let out sometime between 3:30 and 4:15. So make sure to coordinate with your school to ensure that you will have access to your voting room at the time that you mutually agree for your site setup. So for example, if you go at 3:30, make sure they understand that you need access to the gym or cafeteria or your designated voting room. And if they're not able to provide that to you at that time, you might want to go a little bit later at say 4:30 once the students have exited the school for the day. So again, that's a little bit different because usually school is not in session on the day of the site setup. So make sure to coordinate that closely with your school. And if you're not at a school, if you're at a regular polling place, then this may not be an issue for you, but always coordinate with them on a mutually agreed setup time. As one of your key preparations before Election Day, make sure to read through chapters 14 and 15, emergencies and evacuation procedures in the chief's notebook. You want to be familiar with this information in the event a situation does arise on Election Day. All right, now it's election morning and it's time to open the polls. Between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, you want to make sure that you set up 2 ballot scanners and you need to set up 1 ballot marking device. There's no change in this guidance from our office, but you do need to make sure you've set up and opened both ballot scanners. We expect again that this will be a busy election in terms of voter turnout on Election Day. If it's not, you can always turn your second scanner around, but it needs to be powered on and ready for use immediately in case the first scanner is not does not work for any reason. Now, one key update here is you're going to place zip tie seals on the emergency compartment and the ballot compartment of the ballot scanner. This is designed to help improve voter trust and confidence in our processes and to ensure the safety and security of our voting machines, even during voting hours. You're also going to set up your provisional bag during opening procedures. So there's some Velcro pieces inside that you just need to stand up and assemble. It's very easy. You need to make sure, as you see in the picture on the top right, that you lock the bag and apply a zip tie seal to the bag. And that's feeding it through the zipper and the hole on the tab, the grommet hole there that you see, to secure those items together so that they can't be opened otherwise on Election Day during voting hours. And then of course, on the top, there's a plastic piece that you simply need to slide out to allow you to deposit provisional ballot envelopes into the provisional bag. So again, set up your provisional bag during opening procedures and make sure to slide that slot open so provisional ballot envelopes can be inserted. For the seals that you place on the provisional bag and on the ballot scanners, you now record them on a section at the top of the machine certification form. So we did this in June and we're continuing this in future elections. We want to make sure we've recorded the seals that you put on there. If for some reason you do need to use the emergency compartment on one of your ballot scanners, then you would need to break the seal that's on the emergency compartment of the ballot scanner, open it up, and then put a new seal on it for the duration of the day. And you record that information in the bottom part of this box. And if that happens, give us a call. We're happy to walk you through that. In your morning meeting with all officers before polls open, make sure to prepare them for any emergency situations. Give them a general review of emergency procedures. Make sure you've agreed and designated on an outside meeting location in the event of an evacuation. And remind all officers to fill out the evacuation guide on the back of their during the day guides. So we started doing this last year, but on the back of each yellow guide is now an evacuation guide. And you just want to make sure that the election officers fill out what is the building name, address, the closest census number, the other information you see there on the middle of that page. As always, we have 3 key phone numbers for you to call if there's any issues on election day. Give us a call at general support at 5:30 a.m. if any officers have not arrived. Give them a little time in case they're running a little bit behind or they're lost getting into the entrance of the building. But as of 5:30, if they have not arrived, do let us know and we'll send out reserve officers as replacements. Or during the day of the election, call us about any general issue about policies or procedures. Give a call to the voter support number for any questions about specific voters, voter registration issues, and any SDR or provisional questions. Or even just to check, is this voter in the right precinct or not? You can give that phone number a call. And you want to call tech support for any equipment issues. Those are questions about your ballot scanners, ballot marking devices, e-poll books, or admin tablets. So again, these are the 3 key phone numbers and they're on the inside cover of your Chief's notebook. All right, now let's turn to during the day. As always, there are 3 turnout surveys that you're going to fill out at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 3 p.m. to let us know how many voters have voted so far in your precinct. Any election officer may complete the turnout surveys, and the forms are on your admin tablets, and we'll send you as the chief and assistant chief a text message reminder about 15 minutes before each survey. And in these surveys, you only need to fill out the voter turnout. We're no longer asking questions about, excuse me, about the number of provisionals. As a reminder, there are certain people who are allowed inside the polling place. First off, you have authorized representatives. In this election, they would represent a party on the ballot. So an authorized representative should come in with a signed authorization letter from the local Republican Party committee or local Democratic Party committee. You may have news media that show up and ask to film or photograph inside the polling place. There are instructions about how to handle these in your chief's notebook, both in the overview section for generally people allowed in the polling place, including others like rovers, or candidates, or electoral board members. And there's also an entire chapter about authorized representatives towards the back of your chief's notebook. If you do have an emergency situation, you of course should call 911 first for immediate assistance, and then give us a call at general support as time permits, especially if it requires a response from our office or simply to apprise us of what is going on. It's always possible that you may have to evacuate the polling place, for example, due to a fire or even just a fire alarm, a bomb threat, an earthquake, a gas leak. All these situations are covered in the emergency and evacuation chapters of your notebook. And as always, there are the evacuation guides on the back of the during the day guides to help guide you in what you need to get out of the room immediately and who should take what items. So just remember to remind your officers about this. If you have a medical emergency, there is a medical incident report form in the emergency envelope that you should fill out. So for example, if a voter slips and falls and an ambulance has to be called for them, then this is a form that you want to fill out. Give us a call at general support and we can walk you through this process. But it's really important to capture information like the name of the hospital that a voter or election officer is taken to. There's some information you want to collect before that individual leaves the polling place. So just if you have a medical emergency, look for this form and fill it out as soon as you can. While of course, the understanding being to tend to the emergency first. All right, that's a lot of information to take you through what's new before Election Day and during Election Day itself. One of the other big things on Election Day is non-routine and provisional voters. And for that, I want to turn it to my colleague, Sean Rogers, our training and operations manager, to take you through that. Sean?
Thanks, Ravi. In this section, we're going to talk about non-routine and provisional voters, as Ravi mentioned, and then we'll talk about the tools and resources that you have at your disposal to help you out working through these non-routine situations. After that, we'll go into closing and then Q&A. Before we jump into more specifically non-routine voters, I want to talk about what you have in your Chief's notebook to help with certain situations. So there's Chapter 10, Problem Solving. And as a reminder, you'll get your Chief's notebook at the Chief Open House next Tuesday or in your black kit. That Chapter 10, Problem Solving, helps you with certain maybe atypical situations that you wouldn't say necessarily need a provisional ballot or something like that. But it gives you how-tos for things like how to edit or cancel a voter check-in, what to do if you need to spoil a ballot or if a voter has if you need to void a ballot, tips for de-escalating certain tense situations with voters, and explanations for things like blank, overvoted, or mismarked ballots, kind of like how Ravi was talking about earlier with overvotes for write-ins, or generally any overvoted ballot and what your next steps are there. Beyond those sorts of problems, though, certain voters have something going on with them. As a reminder, a non-routine voter is a voter who can't be checked in normally at the check-in table by your regular election officers. A routine voter, by contrast, is a voter who shows up, presents their acceptable ID, their name and address match, and they are good to go and vote their ballot and be on their way. If something in that transaction doesn't go right, let's say the voter has requested an absentee ballot, maybe they brought it with them, maybe they didn't, they're marked with some other status in the poll book, their address has changed, something like that. They'd be referred to you, the chief or the assistant chief, as a non-routine voter. Chapter 8 of the Chief's Notebook, which is also available online on the election officer portal right now, has a list of some common non-routine situations and an abbreviated set of actions to take with references to where you can find more in-depth information. It also has a list of all of the prompts that would appear on the e-poll book, so you don't have to wait for a voter who's in a certain status to arrive at your precinct to see what that e-poll book prompt says. You can read them in advance if you like. And finally, it has the what ifs themselves. In terms of all of the resources we provide, this is the one that's the most detailed. This is the document from the Virginia Department of Elections that we put into the Chief's Notebook and make sure it matches our terminology for voting equipment. And this has a full page explanation for a variety of non-routine situations. Additionally, talking about the e-poll book prompts in specific, if we take a look at the text on one of them, you can see it walks you through what the situation is and what to do. So in this circumstance, or in this example, where we have a voter who has an absentee pre-processed status, that is, it tells you that our office has received their vote by mail ballot and it's been pre-processed by us. It tells the election officer what to do. In most cases, that's going to be referring them to the chief or the assistant chief. And it tells the chief what to do, which is what the voter's situation is and what their options are. So in this circumstance, the voter has already voted and they can vote provisionally, and it tells you which reason code to use, it tells you which section of the voter referral worksheet to use, it tells you which what if applies if you want to go there and read more information, and it gives you any other information that's relevant. Now, there are a number of e-poll book prompts, 15 plus of them for different situations that voters can be in, and those have by and large not changed. One thing we have added this election is an additional e-poll book prompt for a protected voter. Now, this hasn't, protected voters haven't changed in principle. So previously and still, a voter can be a protected voter if they have a qualifying circumstance. So say a law enforcement officer, somebody in the address confidentiality program, or several other options. Those voters provide our office with a PO box so that their registered residential address isn't publicly available on the list of registered voters because they have a reason to redact it. Now, when they go to vote, they just have to provide you with that PO box. This isn't different from before, but now there is a prompt on the e-poll book so that you can see that and not get thrown off, not get confused, because it would be pretty rare. These are a small percentage of the voters in the county. And so when you're going through and you're seeing residence address all day long. When a PO box pops up, you might get slightly thrown. The text on the screen helps keep you on track and remind you what this voter's situation is. And if there's any issue at all, or if the voter is unsure about their own status, you can call our office, the voter support line, and we can help you with these circumstances. So this is a new ePollbook prompt, and the text of this is in the Chief's notebook as well. We try to give you guys every situation that we can to walk you through without you needing to memorize as much as we can. The last piece of the puzzle in terms of resources that we provide is the voter referral worksheet. This is a worksheet that outlines the workflow for the common situations that are likely to or are going to become a provisional ballot. Now, it's also going to be required for any of these circumstances. That is, if you're going to have to work through a provisional circumstance, you're going to use the voter referral worksheet, because on the backside, it becomes a checklist for the provisional specialist to make sure that they're on track. So this worksheet starts with the chief or assistant chief to work through a voter circumstance and ends with the provisional specialist, if it's going to be a provisional, to make sure that that part of the process is completed completely. Now you may say, what are those circumstances? They're listed right at the top, and we'll go into detail later, but briefly right now, it's a voter has an absentee status of some kind in the poll book. A voter is marked as being already, as having already voted on the poll book. A voter is moved or you don't find them at all on the poll book. You'll work through the moving conditions or a potential SDR for those, or if you're unsure. And as Ravi mentioned, we've slightly updated this to help with some moving conditions problems, and I'll go into that into the next section. But again, this is a worksheet to help you get to the right answer so that you don't have to memorize. You can work through the problem with the voter, and it gives you a place to collect the information that you need to help determine what their options are. You know, if you need to know if they're going to do an SDR, you need to be able to write down their address and look it up. This gives you a spot to do that. And again, that's going to be required for these voters who fall into these circumstances. So having talked about the resources available to you, the other one I'll mention is that we're always available by phone. Having talked about the resources that are available to you, I'm going to talk about some common non-routine situations and some tips and tricks for some common errors that we see. So while there are a myriad non-routine circumstances, like I mentioned, there's over a dozen ePollbook prompts, the vast majority that you're going to see from experience are going to be the voter is not on your poll book, or they've moved, or they brought their absentee ballot to the precinct and they want to turn it in. So for that first situation, as is it's our most common provisional type, is same-day registration. That's for when a voter lives in your precinct, but is not currently registered to vote in your precinct. Their option is to vote provisionally as a same-day registration voter. And the most important thing for those is to confirm that they are in the right place for that. An SDR can only happen in the precinct where the voter lives. So if I'm the voter and I come in and I give you my current address, the most important thing for you to verify is that that address is in your precinct. You're going to use the precinct and address lookup app for that. That's on the admin tablet. The second most common circumstance, like I talked about, this one's a little bit more straightforward. If the voter is marked as having been issued an absentee ballot and they have it in their hand, they've brought it to the precinct, they can turn that in, they can surrender it to vote in person and cast their ballot in the precinct. That's the absentee surrender process. All of this is described in the notebook as well, but these are going to be your most common ones if you haven't served recently or if it's your first time serving as a chief or an assistant chief. Now, if they don't have that ballot with them, you'll refer to your voter referral worksheet. That'll walk you through. I'll give you a spoiler. That's also going to be a provisional. Speaking of provisionals, the provisional envelope that the voter is going to be filling out once you've determined that they are going to be voting provisionally has two sides to it, a front and a back. You want to make sure that the voter, if they are indeed voting provisionally, fills out the correct side of the provisional ballot envelope. Now, this is pretty easy because one side is entirely for SDRs. You can see in the bottom, it says there's only one reason. That's reason number one, same-day registration. In the top, it's stamped with SDR. If it's an SDR, you're using that side of the envelope. And if it's any other reason, use the opposite side of the envelope. These envelopes ask for different information from voters, so we want to make sure that they're filling out the appropriate side of the envelope pertaining to their situation. Now, on the other side of the envelope, there's several other options. As you may know from experience, the most common are that the voter didn't bring their ballot or that they've already voted. But again, it's easy. If it's an SDR, it's the SDR side. If it's not an SDR, it's the non-SDR side. Additionally, when it comes to the provisional envelope, we want to make sure that the voter has completed all of the required sections on the envelope to give them the best chance of their ballot being counted. Now, each section has an asterisk next to it if it's required. However, that's kind of dense when you're looking at it at a distance, and when you're in the middle of a long day, you're in the middle of a long 14-hour day, you've got a lot of details to keep track of throughout the day. Again, we want to make sure that you're set up for success. So what we provide is we provide you with two plastic overlays. You can see that these are examples of the provisional envelopes filled out. And if I have to make sure it's filled out completely, you can see there are optional sections there. There are required sections there. What you do with these overlays is you put them on top of the provisional envelope, and this will hide out or occlude all of the optional non-required sections. Now, the voter can still fill them out if they wish, and that's no problem, but you as the election officer don't have to check those for completion. These, as a checking tool, allow you to focus on what's the important required parts of the provisional envelope. And if you see anything amiss here, you would take it back off and ask the voter to take another look. In this instance, these are both filled out complete envelopes, and we can see that much more easily at a glance with these overlays. So you and or the provisional specialist will want to use these to help verify that the voters completed it all the way. And on the back of the voter referral worksheet, when you're working through the provisional checklist, or your provisional specialist is, there's a step that asks that you double check the envelope. You can use these to help with that as well. Moving on to some common mistakes that we see here with provisional ballots. Firstly, on the SDR side of the provisional envelope, there's a question number 3, which asks, have you been convicted of a felony or judged mentally incapacitated and disqualified to vote? This is a required question for the voter to answer, which they can answer either yes or no. If they answer yes, there is a second set of checkboxes where they have to give another answer. If they make a selection on that first line of checkboxes and they mark yes, they have to make a selection on that second line. The provisional overlay just highlights the answer for no on that first line because it's what we see as the most common answer. But that's not the only way a voter can answer that question. They could answer, if they answer yes, they have to answer the second line. And you as the election officer aren't asking for any sort of backing or rationale for this. You want to make sure the envelope is complete because that's your part of the process to play. So this is an easy thing for voters to miss because if you're just going through, you can imagine you're going through and checking off checkboxes. And if you don't read this all the way, you can skip over it pretty easily. So it's something we see here, something I want to mention to be on the lookout for. And again, using that overlay is going to help you see if anything's missing here. The other option I'll talk about here is when you're issuing the provisional itself. So there are several reasons to vote provisionally. We call these reason codes. One of them is called reason code number 6 on the backside of the provisional envelope. And I want to say this reason code is rare. Oftentimes, when we see reason code number 6 issued, it could have been another provisional reason code. So what I'm saying is when you are going through and you're about to issue a reason code number 6, take a pause, think about it for a second and think, is there another provisional reason code that could apply? Oftentimes it could be an SDR or a reason code number 4 with the voter doesn't have their ballot with them. Other is usually not going to be the circumstance that applies. And in fact, the voter referral worksheet and the provisional log have a reminder to give our office a call before proceeding with a reason code number 6, because we want to make sure that you're on the right track and that you're issuing the provisional appropriately. Because really, in our experience, it's very rare that a voter would have truly a reason code number 6 other. And if a voter is in the wrong place, as I mentioned earlier, a voter needs to do an SDR in the precinct where they live. If they're not in the precinct where they live and they insist and they don't want to go to the other place, which can happen sometimes, there's also a spot in the log for you to tell us about that. An example that I see or that we've seen with reason code number 6 is the voter has just put in their voter registration, let's say a week ago, and it's election day. And you might think, wow, the voter is registered to vote, but I don't see them. I guess I'm going to select other. That's an example where you would pause and see if anything else applies, because something not everybody realizes is that there's a close of books surrounding election day where voters can't make a change to their registration. So that voter's application that they put in hasn't been processed. A voter in that circumstance would still have to do an SDR. Essentially, they're not on your poll book up to date. You would want to do an SDR if they're in the right place. So that's something where, as the voters were talking through their scenario, and you're thinking through it, you don't want to get confused and end up issuing a provisional for the wrong reasons. So follow your voter referral worksheet and all the other resources that you have, your ePublic prompts, if applicable, and the what ifs, and give our office a call if you need any help with any of these, especially if you're going to issue a reason code number 6, because we want to make sure that you're on the right track. Once you've completed a provisional, or your provisional specialist has completed the process with the voter, all provisionals go into the provisional bag. This is going to be at the provisional specialist table right next to the provisional specialist and or the chief or assistant chief. The top slot, after you've sealed it at the beginning of the day, like Ravi talked about earlier, gets open and left open all day. And once the provisional ballot goes in there, it's there throughout the rest of the day. So you want to make sure that you've logged it in the provisional log on the admin tablet before it goes in there. Now you have two admin tablets in your precinct, so that you can use one to do turnout surveys and address lookups in the precinct and address lookup app, the PAL app. And the other one, your provisional specialist can be using for using the provisional log or helping you with any of those other functions, depending on what your volume of provisionals are throughout the day. But as Ravi mentioned, between last November and now, this is a difference from the November presidential election. We brought these in for the first time earlier this year. This stays at that side of the room so that you don't have to have voters walking across the room with their provisional ballot, keeps things all in one place. At the end of the day, of course, and Gene will talk about this in a later section, you open that bag up and separate out the ballots, provisional ballots. Now, having talked about non-routine and provisional ballots at length, I'm going to talk about that. One of those resources that we offer, the voter referral worksheet. It has 4 sections to it, and it has seen a slight update since last November. And many of you on this webinar may not have served since last November. So we're going to walk through how to use this resource and how it's going to be useful to you as you work through non-routine situations. So as a reminder, the voter referral worksheet has 2 sections, one for the chief or the assistant chief, and one for the provisional specialist. The section for the chief and assistant chief asks you for what the voter's situation is and provides you a spot to work through what the resolution is going to be. And if indeed that is a provisional, on the back side is where the provisional specialist does their checklist. And on the top is where you as the chief or assistant chief mark what is that reason, so that when the provisional specialist is marking through the envelope, they know what to mark. Now let's walk through the steps to working through it. Again, it can seem like a lot, especially since it's printed on 8.5 by 14, but any given voter is only going to fall into one of those circumstances. So you'll see as we talk about those circumstances, how it's going to be straightforward to work through with the voter. So you'll know to start the voter referral worksheet, if a voter falls into one of these categories, they're marked with an absentee status on the poll book, or they're marked as already voted, or they've moved, or you can't find them at all on the e-poll book, or finally, you're entirely unsure. The top of the worksheet gives you a spot to write down your name and your precinct, and the voter's name. We'll talk about how the different sections work one by one, but you can see it's not that complicated. If a voter has an absentee status on the poll book, they're either being issued a ballot or some other absentee status. And so you can see if it's one of those 2 things, there are your next steps. If the voter has the ballot, it tells you which what if number you can reference for a full in-depth explanation of the steps to take. But as we talked about earlier, commonly that's going to be an absentee surrendered situation. So once you're good with those, you don't need to keep using the worksheet for that. And if the voter doesn't have the ballot with them, that's a provisional reason number 4, it says. And anytime it says walks you to the end step of issuing a provisional, it'll remind you of the reason number that applies, the reason code. If it's any other absentee status, it tells you the next steps there and the provisional number that applies. Now, for another circumstance, the voter is marked as having already voted. Well, the first step you're going to want to do is make sure that you've looked up the correct voter. Sometimes a voter could have a similar name at the check-in table. They accidentally didn't find the correct voter and they referred you to the chief, but they're actually okay because they looked up, you'll find them with an advanced search on the e-poll book. But if you've confirmed that the voter is indeed marked as already voted, and you have the correct voter in front of you, it gives you the next steps there, the provisional to issue, and directs you to the backside to continue there. Now, where we jump up a little bit in terms of info that's required of you is when we get into SDR, or voters not being on the poll book or having moved. This is an update from last November. This is no change from June if you served with us in June, but since last November, we've made a slight change to this section to make it easier to get to the answer if you have for most circumstances. So the first thing it asks you is, again, did you look up the correct voter? Once you've confirmed that that is true, you'll continue, and you'll need to write down their current address that they've given you there at the once they've been referred to you. You'll look it up in the PAL app on the admin tablet, and it gives you a spot to write down that address, write down the precinct number it corresponds to, and the congressional district, because you may need that for the next step. Now, if the voter lives in your precinct, then you're good. This is an example of the PAL app that you would use to look up a voter. So let's say in this example, I'm the chief of 849 Newgate North, and the voter lives at 6201 Sandstone Lane, Clifton. You can see where that address is, which precinct it's in, and which congressional district it's in. You can also see if it's a co-located precinct. For the minority of you who are in our co-located precincts, it'll tell you that it's either on one side or the other side of a co-located precinct, which is helpful because if a voter goes to the right building, we want to make sure they're on the right side of that co-located precinct. But let's say for this example, I'm the chief of precinct 849 Newgate North, and the voter has given me this address. Here's how I would fill that out. Like I said, I've got a spot to write down the address, the precinct, and the congressional district. And in this scenario, the voter lives in this precinct. I'm good to continue with an SDR provisional. So I can stop there and we can proceed. That would be for the simple case of a voter not being on your poll book, or even if they've arrived and let's say the voter said, I moved in from Loudoun County, or I moved in from another location. If we can determine that they currently and now live in our precinct, they can do an SDR and we can proceed from there. That's what this first step in section C is asking of you, to look up that current address and see what their option are, is if we can proceed with an SDR or not. Let's say though, by way of another example, that the voter does not live in my precinct. We'll use a different address for this example. So this is a different voter, and they've given me this address, 4029 Ridgetop Road. And I've already used the PAL app to look up that that's in precinct 132 Monument, also in the 11th Congressional District. And still for this example, I'm the chief of precinct 849. So the voter doesn't live in my precinct. That precinct is not 849. So we continue to box C2 if the voter doesn't live in my precinct. You can see it's sort of a drop-down box for if we need to work through the moving conditions. The moving conditions are something you refer to when the voter has moved to determine what their voting options are. Depending on where they moved and how long ago they moved, they may have a couple of options. So there is a chart and a flow chart, or a grid and a flow chart in your Chief's notebook that have this information. The grid goes across for how far they've moved and down for how long ago that was. And the flow chart asks you that same information. It goes how far they've moved, and at the bottom, how long ago that was. You can see, depending on the different combination of those options or those criteria, the voter has a couple of different options. Now, there's more information listed out in what ifs number 5, 6, 7, and 8. You can see at the top of the grid, it says more info at that what if number for details. But essentially, we need to take the info that we've written down on the voter referral worksheet and use the moving conditions to determine what their options are. So again, this voter moved from precinct 132 into precinct 8. I'm sorry, this voter moved from precinct 849. We can see their old address on the poll book was 13241 Braddock Road, Clifton, in precinct 849. So the other piece of this here is the voter shows up, they have a new address, and their old address that's still on the poll book that I've looked up in the precinct and address lookup app is in precinct 849. So now we have all the info we need. We know where the voter moved from and to, and when that was. That was March 5th of this year. So for this voter who's moved from 849 into 132 in the same congressional district earlier this year, we'll take our chart or our flow chart and find out what category they're in. Because it was in that recent move, it falls on that first line, that first grid, and it was within the same county and the same congressional district, but to a different precinct. We see that the voter is eligible to vote in the old precinct where they're still registered, or they can do an SDR in their new precinct. And remember, for this scenario, I'm still the chief of 849 Newgate North. I am their old precinct. And so you want to find out, am I the old precinct or am I the new precinct? In this situation, I am the old precinct. This voter does not have to travel to precinct 132 Monument because they fall within the moving rules of the moving conditions. So they're still eligible to vote in this precinct. I would have to issue the paperwork listed in what if number 6. In general, whenever a voter is voting, whenever you've worked through the moving conditions, the voter has something to complete. Either it's an SDR in their new place, or in this circumstance, a voter registration application to update their address so this doesn't happen again. But either way, this voter can vote normally in the old precinct, which is mine. Now, that's a lot to talk about. That's a lot to go through, especially difficult for me to talk about slide by slide. If you want to get practice with these, we have our Chiefs Open House next Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. We'll have plenty of opportunity to work through moving conditions voters, because these can get tricky. Like I talked about, you have to know, am I the old precinct? Am I the new precinct? And I have to write down the voter's information. I want to cut through it a little bit if I can and say, remember, if a voter is in your precinct and they're not registered in your precinct, they can do a same-day registration. You just have to determine that. If that's not the case, that's when we turn to the moving conditions and see what their options are. This was one example, as you saw on the flow chart and the grid. We could end up on a different situation depending on the voter's specific circumstances. So again, work through this methodically and give us a call if you need help, and come to the open house if you want to work through it, work through some practice problems. But moving on to the last part of the voter referral worksheet, again, the prior parts give you a spot to write down everything you need to work through a voter situation, and so does this section. Section D, you're unsure. Now, there's no shame in admitting that you're unsure about what to do with a specific voter circumstance. Let's say it's the first time you've seen it. It's been a long time since you've seen it. You just want backup. You can give our office a call and we'll walk you through it. As a reminder, if the voter has a prompt on the e-poll book, you can follow the instructions there. But we're always happy to walk you through what steps to take, especially if you need to look up a voter's circumstance. Remember, our voter support line has more information than you have at your disposal. They can look at information outside of Fairfax County, or perhaps the voter's prior voter registration record. If they have to look up anything about that voter, they're happy to do so. And this gives you a spot to work through anything that you just want some reassurance on from our office. So that's the fourth section of the voter referral worksheet. If you need it, you're unsure. So we've talked about the front section, which is about working through these problems. The back side is all about checklists. In elections, we love checklists, and we've given you plenty of these so that you have enough that you won't run out. At the top, you as the chief or assistant chief, mark the reason number that the voter is voting provisionally, and this presumes that they are indeed voting provisionally. If you work through the voter referral worksheet and no provisional is needed, then of course you don't need to move on to this backside. Once you've done that, your provisional specialist will know how to proceed with the provisional envelope. There's a 12-step checklist here to make sure nothing goes awry, and to make sure that the envelope is filled out completely and that we followed all of the legally required steps, and that the voter has the best chance of their ballot being counted. We have confirmed that all of the required sections of the envelope are filled out. The election officer has filled out and signed their section. Someone else has given it a double check to make sure, or to add some extra confidence, and that the voter has been given their provisional notice, which is required to provide that to a voter, and it's logged in the admin tablet and inserted into the provisional bag. There's an example of this in the Chief's notebook. If you want to see what all these steps are, this gives a one place to make sure the provisional specialist, again, doesn't have to memorize all of these and can stay on track as they're going through a provisional. Once you've worked through the voter referral worksheet, they simply go in envelope number 8. Like most of our forms, it says in the top right which envelope it's returned in. This doesn't get folded and inserted into the provisional ballot envelope itself. It just gets returned in envelope number 8. In fact, we don't even open those provisionals until after the electoral board has voted to count or not count them. So we really ask that you return them in envelope number 8, like you would with any other voter-related document. You can think of voter registration application, an affirmation of eligibility. There's several things returned in envelope number 8. This is another one of them. So we've talked about non-routine voters and provisional voters, talked about some things to keep in mind with those, and we've worked through the voter referral worksheet and how you might use it for a variety of circumstances. That's a big portion of during the day, but another big thing about your day is closing. I'm going to turn it on over to Jean here to transition you over to that state of mind, to that framework, and give you some reminders for closing and tips and tricks and things like that. Jean?
Thanks, Sean. The polls are now closed. The last voter has left the room. Everybody take a big breath, big deep breath, get a drink of water, and just take a pause here. You're going to slow down a little bit because you've got this. You have checklists for every single task, so everything's going to get done. There's no need to rush through closing. We're going to have your back the whole time. All right, let's go on to the Chief's closing checklist. And closing is all about two things: delegation and verification. You've got on the right side of your slide there, you see the Chief's closing checklist, the black one. That is your kind of 10,000-foot view of the entire closing procedure. You're going to be delegating things to your officers by handing out the red closing guides. Everything has a red closing guide. Give out pens with the guides and tell the election officers to check off the boxes as they follow the steps. Mistakes happen when people are in a hurry and don't do each step on the guides. Help your election officers get comfortable with the procedures by handing out those tasks to them maybe before 5 o'clock. There's usually a lull in the afternoon that you can use to do that. And just a reminder, wait until all the voters have voted and left the voting room before you start closing. The closing numbers worksheet is the most popular form at closing. It seems like every team needs this at the same time. That's okay. Many of the guides will tell election officers to write numbers on this worksheet. Just, put your hand up and say, who's got the form? You'll need the form later in the night to fill out the SOR helper. So it needs to be completely filled out. If anything is missing on this, give it back to the people who were responsible for filling it out. Now let's talk about some important things to watch out for during closing. The three things that are going to be happening right away at closing are closing the ballot scanners, the provisional specialist closing, and the collector officer closing. So the closing the ballot scanners, if you've used both scanners, close the one with the highest public count first. Obviously, if you've only used one scanner, start with that one. But completely finish closing your scanner before you move on and do the next one. Because if something goes wrong, you're going to want that second scanner as a backup, because you might have to run all the ballots through that one. So don't try to cut corners by doing both scanners at the same time. Do them sequentially, not in parallel. Another thing that sometimes trips people up is the flash drives. There are 2 USB flash drives in every scanner. You don't pull those until the scanner is completely powered off and shut down. If you pull those drives too soon, the data is going to get corrupted, just like crashing the hard drive on your computer. Then the ballots would have to be rescanned on the other scanner, making for a really long night. We know the collector officers are waiting for those flash drives, but they'll be fine. They can just chill for a few more minutes. And if you have any machine issues during closing, don't try to figure it out yourself. Sometimes people get real curious. No, call tech support. They will walk you through whatever the procedure is for your particular situation. And if anything does happen, just make sure to document that in your chief's notes. The closing of the scanners prints out some long tapes that the ballot scanning closing team, they're going to be giving you these tapes. But before they do, they're going to start at the very top of that tape at the ballot status accounting report, and they're going to find 3 numbers to write down on the closing numbers worksheet. They are going to find, and we've circled them in red there, the public count, the total number of standard ballot sheets, and the total express vote cards. So what's the difference? What is a total standard ballot sheet? So let me show you. It's literally just a regular paper ballot. What prints on those tapes is language that is set by the vendor, so we really can't change the words. But a standard ballot sheet is the number of regular paper ballots. An express vote card obviously is an express vote card. We are now calling that a ballot card in training, but on the tape, it's going to print and say express vote card. So 3 things that those ballot scanner closing people are going to write down: the public count, total standard ballot sheets, and total express vote cards. And that's for both scanners. And if you didn't use the second scanner, you're going to be writing zeros. You still have to go through the whole closing process, just like you went through the whole opening process as well. Let's talk more about these flash drives. This is one of my little bugaboos. The scanner team pulled 2 drives from each scanner: a primary drive with a purple label and a backup drive with a white label. They will give you a total of 4 drives, 2 for each. We color code these to make it easy to know where they go. The 2 drives with purple labels go in the purple pouch, which is sealed with a zip tie seal. The 2 drives with white labels go in the white envelope number 7. So purple and purple and white and white. It's super easy, right? You'd be surprised. Sometimes we see purple pouches with 4 drives in them, or a mix of purple and white, or an envelope 7 that's empty. This is part of your verification responsibilities as chief, so please double check that you've put the right drives in the right places. Let's talk briefly about the provisional specialist closing. During the closing of that particular task, 2 officers will sort the provisional envelopes into 2 piles, one for SDR, one for non-SDR. Then they will independently count the number of envelopes in each pile and record those numbers on the closing numbers worksheet. Finally, they're going to take the envelopes and put them in the appropriate envelope 1A, and then give the envelope 1As to you. The collector officers have been busy too during closing. While they've been waiting for the flash drives and for the envelopes 1A, they disassembled the drop box and prepared the chain of custody form and the trip lock bag. A little tip for those collector officers: we get this call every election night. Remind them to tear the receipt strip off the trip lock bag before they seal it. I know they want to leave as soon as possible, but please stop and make sure that they have everything that they should have. There should be a sealed purple pouch with 2 flash drives with purple labels, 2 large green envelopes, and the trip lock bag containing absentee ballots from the drop box. You don't want to be that precinct who left something behind. And a special note for you co-located precincts out there: not as many as we normally have, since this is a slightly smaller election. Collector officers will have double of everything because you had 2 precincts. So there'll be 2 purple bags, 4 green envelopes, and 2 trip lock bags. You might have shared a drop box. If that's the case, one precinct is going to have an empty trip lock bag, and the chain of custody form in there will say that there are 0 absentee ballots. So even though you shared the drop box, that one precinct who didn't have the drop box, they still have to have a trip lock with a chain of custody form in it. Let's talk about returning the ballots. You're going to have 2 kinds of ballots coming back to your depot. You'll have voted ballots that came out of the scanner, and blank ballots that were still in the cage or left at the ballot table. The voted ballots are packed in number 3 boxes. Please use brand new boxes that were flat packed in the equipment cage for those. For your leftover blank ballots, just reuse the boxes that they were delivered in. No need to waste a new box on that. And don't assemble any more boxes than you need. Return any unused flat pack boxes in the cage. As Ravi mentioned, we made the statement of results really, really easy now. The SOR helper is going to do literally all the work. If you've got a completed closing numbers worksheet and they have filled everything out, you just plug it in to the SOR helper on one of the admin tablets. It spits out a fully completed SOR that you then do need to copy to the physical paper copies of the SORs. There's even a red closing guide to walk you through all of this. But if you get stuck, call us. Don't wait for your rover or anything like that. Call us. We are here. We will walk you through every step of this and make sure that you get it done. And do look over both copies of the SOR before you put it in envelope number 2. There should not be any blanks. When we do that canvas on the day after the election, we're checking this over. This is the most important document that you're doing. So please take the time to do it. Make sure everybody's printed their names, signed it, all that stuff. Well, what do you do if the numbers don't add up? Well, let's go through an example in the back of, look at the back of the SOR. In section 7, we ask you, does the number of ballots from the cage, what was delivered to you, does that match the number of ballots that you accounted for, the ballots that were used and unused? If it does, you check yes, great. If it doesn't, you check no, but then we give you a couple common scenarios. Maybe there was a pack of ballots that was a little over or a little under. That's why you have that ballot receipt form, and you write down how many ballots were in each pack. If one of those apply, you check the box. If it doesn't, you check other, and you give us your best explanation as to what you think happened. Again, if you get stuck, give us a call. We will walk you through and try to sort out what happened. You can get more practice with this, the SOR helper and the SOR, at the Chief Open House next week. Envelope number 7. All right, remember this gets the 2 white flash drives with the white labels on them. It also contains the trip lock bag seal, all your cut zip tie seals you've been accumulating, and the red seals from the printer, the ballot scanner printer compartments. This is all part of the Packing Your Numbered Envelopes closing guide. Before you seal envelope 7, turn it over. There's a little bit that you need to fill out on the back, but we've made this really easy. All you're doing is copying directly off the machine certification form. You're taking information about both scanners, the opening and closing public count, protected count, and seal numbers, along with the serial number. So you've highlighted it there. You just literally, if this was a computer, you'd be copying and pasting it just from one straight over to the other. And do a final check to make sure that there are flash drives in here, because these do go to the courthouse after the election. Speaking of the signatures, part of the trust but verify is verifying the signatures. You'll want to make somebody your signature officer, have them go around with this red guide and make sure that everything has been signed. Then you, as the chief, you double check that yourself, because you do not want any of the election officers, particularly yourselves as chief and assistant chief, to have to come to the office to sign things after the election. Once somebody has to come and sign, trust me, they never want to come back and sign again. So make sure that everything's signed. And as a reminder, you don't want to pre-sign anything during the day. A little shout out to help our IT team. When you're packing your admin tablets, leave them powered on, just like the e-poll books. That makes things a little easier for those folks. And those get put back in the zippered mesh bag, put on top of everything inside your black kit. All right, closing is done. You're at the final step. You are having your officers help you pack your car. You're going to have 5 things in that car: a black kit, a cardboard banker's box with your e-poll books, number 3, voted ballot boxes, number 6, blank ballot boxes, and the chief supply return form. This is your chain of custody form. You're saying you're providing these items to us, and we're going, yep, this is the number of items that we've received from you, to making sure that we can account for everything. Do remember to call or text your rover when you're leaving the polling place, not before, but as you're leaving. They can't go home until all the precincts on their route have left for the depot. So help make their night a little shorter as well, and give them that little text or call so that they know. Because, you know, later in the night, we start calling precincts saying, hey, how's it going out there? Do you need any help closing? We want to know that you're doing okay and you've closed down and on your way. And thank you for that. It's time to move on to Ravi for some final reminders.
Thank you, Jean. Yeah, you don't want to be the recipient of one of our calls at the end of election night, wondering where you're at, and you're home snuggled in bed at that point, and we didn't know that. All right, let's go through a couple final reminders here. First and foremost, we want to swear all of you in with the oath. So go ahead and raise your right hand and say this along with me. Ready? We're going to read the screen together. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will perform the duties for this election according to law and the best of my ability, and that I will studiously endeavor to prevent fraud, deceit, and abuse in conducting this election. Congratulations. On behalf of the Electoral Board, you are now sworn in for this election. And of course, if you're the chief, your job is now to swear in your other officers on election morning. We want to make sure you all get credit for this briefing. So later today, we're going to send you an email with a link to take a short quiz. There are some questions about the content in this briefing, so we hope you've paid attention in order to receive credit for watching the briefing. And if you need to go back and watch any part of it again, we're going to include a link to the recording as well. Do make sure to complete that by this Sunday, August 24th. Now, we want to answer all of your questions. So if you have any questions that you haven't submitted yet, go ahead and use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Tap the Q&A, submit your question, and we're more than happy to answer those questions here today. And if you have any questions, feel free to email or call us. I'm pleased to be joined by a number of office staff who are going to help answer your questions here today. We have our Senior Deputy General Registrar and Deputy Director, Cheryl Jones. We have our IT Manager, Cord Whitehouse. Our Communications and Compliance Division Chief, Sean Stewart. Our Voter Services and Same-Day Registration Manager, Bushra Ardalan. We have our Voting Equipment and Logistics Assistant Manager, Judy Clardy. Our Election Supplies Coordinator, Justin Knairnshield. Our Clerk to the Electoral Board and Polling Place Liaison, Beth Methvessel. Deputy Registrar for Early Voting Satellites, Florence Brown. And Deputy Registrar for Absentee Voting, Ben Howard. Speaking of whom, Flo and Ben, how are things going in terms of voting so far? Our chiefs and our assistant chiefs are very curious to know how early voting and absentee mail is coming along, so they know what to expect on election day. Flo?
Thank you, Ravi. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Business has been very steady at the satellites. Right now, we have 2 locations that are open, the Fairfax County Government Center and North County Governmental Center. And we have seen just under 7,000 votes at those 2 locations since we've been open July 25th. We have 9 additional locations that will be opening next Friday, August 29th. And we also have 2 more Saturdays that we will be open, August 30th and September 6th. Early voting ends on September 6th, so please come out and see us before Election Day so you can take care of your civic duty and vote. Our last day of early voting on September 6th, we're open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Chiefs and assistant chiefs, just to share one tip with you, one thing that we are finding from some voters or seeing with some voters is that they're a little bit confused as to what's on the ballot, particularly if they see candidate signs for the fall election. They come in and sometimes they expect to see those candidates on the ballot. So your greeter and your check-in staff will need to remind them that, again, this is just the special election to replace the late Jerry Conley, and that is the only race on the ballot. But other than that, business has been good, and I hope the same for you on Election Day. Good luck, and if you have any questions about early voting, please contact us at earlyvoting@fairfaxcounty.gov. Back to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Flo. Let's turn that right over to Ben to see how things are coming along in absentee mail land.
Hey folks, absentee mail land is doing pretty good. We are working along right now. We have about 15,000 of our 52,000 ballots back, and that's about where we expect to be right now. We expect a total of about 32,000 back, or excuse me, 30,000 back. So we're about halfway, a little over there. And we're working to get all of them processed and through. If people have any questions, they can always contact our hotline, or they can always contact the front office, and we can always answer those. In the confusion and along the lines of Flo's note, we have had questions about when is my November ballot coming, where are the gubernatorial candidates. Those ballots will go out on September 19th. So if you've got folks showing up in the precinct going, well, I want to vote in the special in person, but I want to vote by mail in November, they will get their ballots. They need to request those unless they're on the permanent absentee, but all of those ballots start going out the 19th. So they don't need to worry about that. They will still be getting those ballots. That's all I have. We're going back to Ravi, I suppose.
Great, thank you, Ben. So thank you to Flo and Ben for giving us an update on how voting is going so far. Let's turn to Jean now for some of the questions that you all have submitted. Jean, what have we got?
Thanks, Ravi. Actually, I'm going to hand this over to Steve, who's going to tee up some questions for us for Sean Rogers.
Thanks, Jean and Ravi. Sean, I've got a few questions for you around the provisional voting process. Does the voter stay with you all the way through the provisional voting process, all the way until you drop the envelope in the green bag? And what if they leave before?
Sure, that's a good question. So the voter needs to stay with you through all the sections that are required of them, and that's up through giving them their provisional notice and giving them their sticker. It's easiest if you have the time for them to stay with you the whole way through. But as you're going through the provisional checklist, that's going to be the section where there's nothing more required of them is once they've been given their notice about the next steps and their I voted sticker. But again, no problem if they stay at your table as you're typing it into the log, especially if you have no line. You may find it easiest to just wait. And, if I'm a voter too, I kind of want to make sure the process is completed without leaving. But that is the step that is the last part of the process for them, is receiving their required things and their I voted sticker.
Great, thank you. And who physically puts the provisional envelope into the bag?
Sure, good question. That's going to be the election officer. So the last step of the provisional checklist on the back of the voter referral worksheet says who does that, and that's going to be the election officer putting it into the bag. That's actually what is expected and what's written out as a requirement. So you as the election officer, after you filled it out, you've put into the log, you've done everything you need. After you've checked it, put into the log, and made sure it's all accounted for. It goes into the bag and you go ahead and do that. So that's one of the other reasons why the voter doesn't need to stay around until that point, because you as the election officer, you're the one who's inserting it into the provisional bag. That provisional bag, I'll give a quick tip. If you're looking for where to put it, I'd suggest to put it next to the provisional specialist table, which itself should be next to the chief's table. It's a good size, it's a good form factor where you can put it on the floor and have it standing up and be accessible without needing to reach too far. And it's also got a strap that you can wrap around the table if you need.
What if someone forgets to log a provisional envelope, but it's already in the provisional bag? Can they open the bag and retrieve it so they can get the log right?
Well, great question. The answer to that is a definite no. Once the provisional ballot bag is sealed. It stays sealed throughout the day and you don't reopen it. You leave the flap open so you can insert provisional ballots, but they can't get taken back out throughout the day. If you miss it on the log, you're gonna have to wait until polls close and you can catch up then and there. That's why it's important to make sure that you're keeping up with the log before the provisional specialist inserts it into the envelope. A quick tip that I would give for that is, as you are logging a provisional ballot envelope, in the top right where it has a spot to write down your precinct number, you can put a little check mark right there so you can have a little reminder that you've logged it and it's good to go into the provisional ballot bag, because you can't get it back out of there until polls close. And at that point, you may have forgotten. So great question. No, that bag has to stay sealed and you can't reopen it until polls close. And that is a code requirement.
So another question, this one about using the voter referral worksheet. In the case of someone who brings in their absentee ballot and decides they want to vote in person, do we only need to use the voter referral worksheet for the first one, or should we continue using it?
Sure, that's a good question. I'll say in general, feel free to use the voter referral worksheet as much as you need to help you work through problems. That's what it's there for. But for a very simple circumstance, like we mentioned, this is one of the two most common non-routine situations where a voter has been issued an absentee ballot, they've requested it, they brought it with them, but they want to surrender it to vote in person. There's not a lot of decision-making that needs to happen there. You just need to confirm that it's their ballot and they're surrendering it to you, and you follow the process as written out in the what ifs. And it's an easy one. Once you've done that first one and you've used the voter referral worksheet and you've got that workflow down, if you don't find it helpful for a surrendered ballot, you don't need to continue with that circumstance anymore. We don't want this to be something that slows you down throughout the day if it's something straightforward and simple, like an absentee surrendered. But again, if you find it helpful to keep all the steps in one place for you, or give you a what if number to refer to or anything like that, you can. But for an absentee surrendered, if you're good to go and you're going with your first and continuing with absentee surrenders, it's not required after that first one. Great
Thank
question.
you, Sean. One last question for you. What do we do with the provisional ballot envelopes at the end of the day?
Sure, yeah. So throughout the day, the provisional ballot envelopes, either the SDR or the non-SDR, whichever side the voters filled out, goes into the provisional bag, the green provisional bag that I just said stays at the provisional specialist table. Once you're done and polls are closed and you can reopen that bag, that's when you then separate them out into your SDR pile and your non-SDR pile. And then you have the green envelope 1A, two of them, one for SDR and one for non-SDR. On those envelopes, you write down some information, the number of provisional envelopes, and follow the instructions in your closing guides to put the provisional envelopes into the appropriate envelopes 1A during closing. So during the day, they go in the provisional bag. During closing, that's when you separate them out into the envelopes 1A, which the collector officer then brings back to the government center along with a couple of other items.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to turn it back over to Jean for some questions for some of the other people.
Thanks, Steve. I am going to be doing a big round robin thing here, going around to lots of different people. So let's check in with our Deputy Director, Cheryl Jones. What types of ID can a voter use for doing a same-day registration?
Remember that, oh, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Remember that the ID is for voting. It's not for registering. So the same ID, they don't need an ID to do a SDR. They just need an ID to vote. So once they've shown you their regular voting ID or completed the ID confirmation statement, they're good to go. They completed.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification, Cheryl. Now we're going to move on to Bushra Ardalan, head of our voter services. And people always want to know, how many same-day registrations do you expect for this election?
This is a hard question.
Okay, you got to figure this out magically.
I hope we have 100,000 to keep Bush and her team busy.
Okay. No, so the highest number was November that we had 14,000 SDR. Probably this election maybe, say, let's go high, 1,000. Because I want to know that we are doing clean voter lists all the time. any voter they are changing their address, we send them update forms. So most of the time we are after our voter where they move. So our voter list is almost up to date, but people last minute who they are not registered or they move. So maybe 500 to 1,000. I hope it's not high. What do you think, Ravi?
I don't know. I defer to you as the expert. But also, Bushra, this is the first election in which the voter registration deadline is going to be a little bit different than before. Is that right?
Because this is a special election, for a special election, it was always the same 7 days. So I don't think that will affect our November number. But for special election, it was the same 7 days.
So 7 days, voters have until
Mhm.
7 days before this election to register or update their registration. Otherwise, they have to do an SDR. And then in November, it'll
Uh,
only be about 10 days, right? Down from 21 days that it
yes.
used to be.
So for this election will be September 2nd, last day of close of the book. The voter can eligible to update or register to vote.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be ready for any number of SDRs and provisionals that we get.
We are ready. No worries.
Thank you so much, Bushra. Let's jump over to Judy Clardy, who is with our voting equipment team. With all the new equipment that we have, the new ballot scanners, the new ballot marking devices, is this going to affect the way our cages are packed?
It's going to have a minimal effect on the way our cages are packed. They're approximately the same dimensions. So if you have a black cage, the scanners are still going to be turned sideways. You're still going to have to be careful about that. The door you open first, which is on the right-hand side, will still be the scanner that contains the ballots. And the other scanner will still be the one that contains all your supplemental materials. We've already had one election with the new scanners. This is our first one with the new EVs. So no real change with this cage pack.
And Judy, I know one of the things that you and your team are responsible for is unloading all the cages when they get back to the warehouse. Have there been issues in the past with the way that the signs are put back into the cages and sometimes things are sticking out of the cages? Do you want to share a little bit about that with our chiefs so that they can hopefully pack things well so to make it a little bit easier for you all?
Yes, I do know that at the end of a very long day, you're just trying to get, of course, all of your paperwork done correctly and make sure the closing goes well. The one most important aspect of cage packing that we do ask that you pay attention to is to make sure that the metal frames that the signs are on they're not sticking out of the cages. It's a hazard, and for some reason they always seem to be sticking out at eye level, which is a little bit dangerous for the people who are moving those cages around after the election.
Indeed. Well, we don't want anybody's eyes getting poked out. So please follow those red closing guides, folks, that show you how to pack the cage. And for the few precincts that get the black equipment cage instead of the gray, you will be getting a separate guide just for your particular type of cage to help you pack that safely and unpack it safely as well. So let's move on to Sean Stewart, head of our communications division. Sean, do we expect any media at our precincts on election day? Have you been getting any requests from any outside groups? Any candidates that might be popping in here and there?
Hey, Gene, that's a great question. Absolutely, right? Any kind of news in Fairfax or any kind of activity in Fairfax County is always news, right? It's a special election. I think as Ravi, Flo, and Ben made a good chance of mentioning, we have voters who are anticipating November and putting September in between, and we have other voters who know after they participated in the party nominating contests that there should have been something going on right now. And lo and behold, here it is, a special election. So yeah, be prepared. There'll be some interesting activity, certainly any kind of action that impacts Congress, and an off year in a Virginia election is going to be news. So you've got some great information in your chief's notebook, some outstanding information to let you know what the media guidelines are. Feel free to reach out to the support number if you have any general questions on that, and they will certainly get you in touch with me if we need it. But be ready, be willing, allow them the opportunity to participate inside the polling place as listed if they can. Otherwise, they will hopefully be out in the parking lot smiling, talking to our voters that are making it through a good day. So great question, Gene. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. And I'd like to point out to the chiefs and assistant chiefs that the chiefs page is now live in the portal. And we do have information then there if we receive it about a particular group or news organization, if we know somebody's going to be in your precinct, we will put that in the system. You'll be able to see it in your portal. So that is available to you. As soon as we have it, we'll put it in there for you. I have a question for Beth Methvessel Dixon, who is the clerk to the Electoral Board. Beth, we have this happen every election. There are always one or two polling places that we just have a really tough time getting hold of somebody. Do you have any tips on that might help us out there?
Well, given that this is a special election, an election that's not expected, let's give a little bit of leeway when contacting polling locations, especially schools. The school just started yesterday, so I would use all the contact information available, send an email, make a phone call, even text, in order to set up your pre-site visit. If you still can't make a connection and time is running down, please contact me and I will help you make that contact. I also wanted to reiterate something that Ravi had said earlier with respect to Monday setup in schools. Because schools are in session, I wanted to be very sensitive for those locations and make that contact. Make sure the school knows what time on Monday is the best time for you to come, and especially for those that are in co-located precincts in a school. You need to go together, so don't split that setup time. Make sure you reach out to the other chief of the other precinct, coordinate your Monday setup. I'm going to assume that most of the schools will want you to come after 3:30. When the students have vacated the premises. So, but I just wanted to reemphasize that, how important that is, to be sensitive to the fact that school is in session on Monday. I don't foresee any issues with other locations, although there is a chance that one may have a preschool in it. We want to follow those same rules. If you're the chief of a private location that also happens to have a school, I can think of one off the top of my head. It would be the Hidden Meadow precinct. So anyway, but once again, I'm available. I know pretty much all of the facility contacts, and I'll be happy to make sure you get connected if you're having trouble.
Thanks, Beth. Are you aware of any back to school nights, PTA meetings, things like that on the day before the election that might cause any conflict?
Right now, I have verified with the facilities coordinator for the schools that there should be no conflicts for setup on Monday. There certainly won't be on Tuesday, with schools being, with it being a teacher workday. So my anticipation is that it will run smoothly and no back to school nights are scheduled on Monday or Tuesday.
That's great. Thank you. All right, I've got a question for Cord Whitehouse, our IT manager. We always seem to have a few precincts that have some difficulty getting their admin tablets working on cell service. Do you have any thoughts for us on that, Cord?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Jean. So first thing I would say is if you are a location that is at a school, then we definitely want to check and see if you're connected to the school's Wi-Fi. All admin tablets are set to connect to the school's Wi-Fi as the default, and that should hopefully be a great option for those schools that don't get great cellular coverage. If you're at a school location where you just also don't get great Wi-Fi coverage, or if you're at a private facility where you don't have the option to connect to Wi-Fi, then your best bet is to, if possible, check different locations inside of the room. A lot of times going towards possibly a window or a wall that leads externally to the outside of the building can sometimes help a little bit with reception. The other possibility is if you do have time in the day where it's a little bit slower, you could even step outside to maybe submit a form where you could possibly get better signal if that's a possibility. At the end of the day, if you just are unable to get any reception at all and the admin tablet's not working for you, first, if you have a moment, call into Tech Command and let us do a little bit of troubleshooting. If we determine, unfortunately, that your location just doesn't get great signal, then that's when you would call in and you would speak with the election officer team, and they might be able to submit that survey for you or help you out in another manner.
Thanks, Court. Appreciate that. And we are always trying to improve connectivity at the various precincts to make sure that these admin tablets work well for you. So let's move on to Justin, our supplies manager. Just a point of clarification, Justin, is the cage key going to be packed in the orange pouch along with the other machine keys?
Thank you, Jean. No, the cage key will still be attached to the handle of the chief kit because you may need to access the cage before election morning for setting up some of the materials, especially things such as posters, which are in the blue bag, which is located inside the cage.
Good point. Now, if we can't come to the open house, if a chief or assistant chief can't come to the open house and get their chief's notebook, will they be able to get that before election day?
Yeah, so if you're unable to attend the open house, the chief and assistant chief notebooks for those individuals will be sent out with the chief kit on the Monday before election day. But just remember, you do still have the digital version available in the election officer portal.
Great plug. Thank you. All right, I'm now going to turn this over to Arash, who is going to be teeing up a host of great questions for Ravi.
Thanks so much, Jean. So Ravi, we have a couple questions here that definitely I would love the answers to. To start with, my assistant chief will be picking up the supplies. Should I select a time for them on my chief portal, even though I am not the one picking it up?
Sure. So if you as the chief are not available to go and pick up the materials yourself and need your assistant chief to do so, don't fill out anything in the portal, contact our office, and we'll advise you on further steps from there. So that should be rare. But we understand, of course, with the timing of this election, that things are a little bit different than usual. But yes, just give us a call in the office. We'll coordinate.
Great. Next one. Can a person who is not an election officer help with setup the night before?
So during setup, it should primarily be election officers who are taking care of the setup duties, especially anything that is sensitive or requires a signature. Now, that said, if you as the chief want to bring your spouse with you to help move tables, set up chairs, that's permissible. But again, anything that requires a signature or anything that is an election document can only be handled by election officers or election staff, such as a rover. And if you don't have enough election officers to help with setup, talk to your rover. They may be able to come out and help you out during that period as well. Because the most important part is when you open your cage, you need to have 2 election officials signing for that. So that could be you as the chief plus the rover.
Great, thank you. On that same topic of setup, do we leave the black bag at the polling place overnight?
So the black kit that the chief receives during their Monday pickup and takes to the setup, what the chief should do with that black kit is to take it home with them after the setup and bring it back the next day. Not to lock it overnight, just in case anything were to happen to it overnight at the polling place, or if you can't get into your building in the morning. So for example, this actually happened in the June election. We had one polling place where the building was locked and the 5 a.m. contact was not responding to help open the building. But because they had their black kit, they had the different materials they needed if the building had not been opened by 6 a.m. to begin voting. Fortunately, we were able to get that issue resolved, but it keeps us on our toes here in the office. And we hope you're not that precinct that's in that situation. But if you are, we are more than prepared to help assist you in that situation. We put a lot of emergency measures in place that we activate in those cases. But short answer to the question is take the black kit home with you and bring it back. What I always recommend is lock it in your trunk overnight, and that way you can't forget it inside your house.
Great. More about procedure. Do we have to have a ballot table? Can we hand ballots directly to the voters at the check-in table rather than using the ballot permit cards?
Yeah, I get where this question comes from, right? And sometimes in smaller elections, you don't have a lot of voters coming through, and you wonder if you can just hand that ballot at the check-in table. So the answer to that question is no. We want all precincts to follow our prescribed procedures, which include having the check-in table be where voters are checked in, they receive a voter permit card, and they make their way over to a ballot table, and that's where they exchange their voter permit card for a ballot, because that's what all of our procedures and checklists are aligned to. If there are circumstances in a specific polling place that you believe don't allow for that. If the voting room is so small where you don't have enough officers to allow for that, contact our office. We'll review the situation and we'll work with you depending on what it is. But in general, we want everyone to follow the same requirements, which is to have a separate ballot table.
And frankly, Ravi, if I can add on to
Please.
that, it simply cuts down on errors. It's a lot harder to forget to check in a voter if you are just being given the ballot permit to give them their ballot. If you're giving them their ballot directly at the check-in table, it's much easier to get your wires crossed. You have their ID, you have the ballot, you're talking to the voter. It's a lot to keep at the forefront of your mind for 14 hours straight. But with a separate ballot table, it's much easier to stay on track.
Absolutely. That's the exact type of error that we see when people don't follow our prescribed procedures on this. So we just want to make sure everyone is doing it the right way and that there are no mistakes that occur. Thank you, Sean.
And on that kind of wave of minimizing errors, so we've gone through before, during, and now at closing, can ballots be removed and boxed prior to the ballot scanner generating the closing tape?
So Rush, I have a feeling you already know my answer to this one, which is no, right? Again, we want to minimize the opportunity for mistakes. So understand it, during closing procedures, it's been about 14 hours that you've been there. It's been a long day. You want to do everything as fast as you can. But I can assure you that is not the bottleneck to you getting out of that polling place. So the answer again is no. Wait for the machines to finish printing the tapes, wait for the screen to go black for at least 10 seconds, then remove the thumb drives, then proceed to the instructions for removing the ballots from the ballot compartment and boxing them up. Don't try and rush through that because that is where mistakes occur. That's where you end up with, we've seen this in some elections where officers try to rush through it. You know, the tapes are, they think they finished printing, but they haven't, and they pull the thumb drives out immediately. Now those thumb drives are corrupted. And now you're going to be there for another 2 to 3 hours because we have to send a new machine out to that precinct. We have to rescan all those ballots, reprint the tapes. Don't try and save 2 minutes of time and end up being there for an extra 2 hours. Let the process go through the way it should. And trust me, there's other steps that are what take time during closing. It's not that. Let that continue.
And just for logistical clarification, for the emergency compartment of the ballot scanner, does the flap remain up at all times during voting hours?
Yeah, this is a great question because the procedures for this have evolved over the years, and we want to make sure, especially with the new equipment and the new emergency departments, that everyone's doing it correctly. So let me start again kind of from the beginning of the day. So during opening procedures, the election officers will inspect the emergency compartment, make sure that it's empty, close the flap, and put a zip tie seal on it. And in 99% of precincts, that's the way it stays for the rest of the day. No issues there. If, excuse me, if you need to use your emergency department during the day, if both ballot scanners are not functional temporarily, and you need to open one or both of the emergency compartments, at that time you would break the seal, open the flap, and then put a new seal on it. And then you would leave it that way for the rest of the day, even if the scanner is restored to its full functionality. So again, let me say that again. At the beginning of the day, the emergency compartment flap is closed and there's a zip tie seal on it. If you have to open it, then you will open that compartment and you will leave it open for the remainder of the day because we don't want to keep opening and closing it. There's some other more detailed laws and procedures around that. But the short version is once it's open, it stays open for the remainder of the day.
That's all the questions I have for you, Ravi. So I'll hand it back over to you to close it out. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rush. So we received a number of questions. I know through the Q&A function, I believe we've answered every single one in writing as well. So if we didn't ask your question live, it should be there in writing. We appreciate so much all of you for stepping up and serving in this election. We know that this election, certainly for us and for you, was unexpected in many ways. And certainly the timing of it makes it challenging, having it in early September, which is a period of time when many officers aren't planning for and just frankly weren't available. So we're operating with a lot fewer available officers than we typically are. That said, we've been able to fully meet our staffing targets for this election. So we have enough officers to staff every precinct at the levels that we'd like to. And we're prepared for an election, even though this is a special election in which turnout is typically much lower. We're prepared for this election to perhaps have the highest special election turnout that we've seen in 3 decades in Fairfax County, given its unique circumstances. We hope we've provided you with the right training and information for that, and of course, the right number of resources to carry you through the day. If you have any questions or issues on election day or before, give us a call. We're more than happy to help. We'd rather help you with whatever situation may come up than for you to attempt it and get it wrong and create more issues down the line. So please do just give us a call. We're happy to help. As Busher said, we're ready for any number of SDRs, and then I'm sure Cheryl will tell you, we're ready for any number of provisional ballots that you may have. We don't know what to expect in an election like this. Every special election is unique and different, but we are prepared as if those numbers may be very high for provisionals and SDRs and just voters in general. We're going to keep a close eye on turnout. So we appreciate you filling out your turnout surveys throughout the day to let us know. And if we do need to get you more ballots, we're prepared to do so during the day. We don't think we will. We think we've provided you more than enough, but we have contingency measures in place if we need to. So with all that said, we hope we've prepared you for Election Day. We're doing this briefing earlier than normal, so you have plenty of time to prepare. You have all the information you need. And we flipped the switch. We've launched the chief page in the election officer portal. So all your information about your precinct rosters, your list of officers and their contact information is available. If you're in a co-located precinct, the other chief and their contact information is available. Your polling place contact information is all available. And we'll remind you in an email that we'll send later today with that as well. But we now believe you have all the information you need to take you through the final weeks of the election, to start reaching out to your polling place, to reach out to your election officers, and get everything in order to be ready for Election Day. As always, reach out to us if you have any questions, but we're confident that you're going to do a great job. So on behalf of our General Registrar, our Electoral Board, thank you so much and have a great Election Day. Thank you, everyone.